All right, here we go. Well, welcome everybody. My name is David. I am a developer advocate here at Balena. I am responsible for engaging with our community, and I get to show off cool projects that are built by our hardware hackers. And I'm joined by one of them today. Phil, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Phil. I'm one of the hackers, as David just said. So that means I build cool projects with the Balena stack. And that means that we get to try our own product and find the pain points and suggest improvements and add to documentation and things like that.
Awesome, thanks. And then for those of you who don't know, Balena is a cloud-based platform for IoT fleet management. You might, however, actually know us from a little bit different project. If you've ever used Etcher to burn an SD card or flash a USB stick, that's one of our open source projects. A lot of people don't even realize that's us behind that. And actually quite a bit of our software is open source. Some of the bits and components that go into Balena Cloud, such as Balena OS, Balena Engine, are all open source, and I'll put in some links to our GitHub repositories as well. But with that said, for today, we're here to talk about a Raspberry Pi based webcam that Phil has put together that allows you to essentially put the device into the home of a family member or loved one, and they, without needing to be technical at all, can then join in video calling for the remote administrator. Phil, you want to go ahead and give us a quick overview of the project?
Yeah. So the problem I was thinking of when countries started going into lockdown, all of us tech savvy people and generally people with mobile devices, we'll turn to video chat to stay connected. And we all find that very easy. And more people started finding Zoom and things like this. And life kind of went on in a different way, but we still talk to each other. But to my mind, there was a large community of people that maybe they don't have any tech at all, or maybe they have some tech, but they're kind of confused. And some people, generally older people, can be quite scared about technology and scared about technology that they don't know how to use. And it can become a bit of a barrier. Even not necessarily just elderly people, but quite a lot of people. I've been in meetings with them in the past couple of weeks about different things. And like the most common thing you hear is you need to unmute your microphone. You need to select what camera you want to use. There's still technical things about joining in with these video calls that can just be beyond some people. And it was with those people that my mind went to, that while the rest of us are staying socially connected in a different way, and those people can't, and they're still being isolated more than ever. So there are sort of other products on the market, more commercial products, but they're very abstract devices generally. They're a small screen. They're a new piece of technology that somebody might not be familiar with, and that in itself can be a barrier and not particularly socially connecting for them. So what I was trying to do with this project was, Balena already had a project. One of the hardware hackers had made a project quite a while ago where you can make what we call Balena Dash, which is a dashboard, and then you can remotely tell that dashboard through the Balena cloud what URL to display. So that's got loads of uses, such as displaying a calendar, displaying photos, displaying your schedule, those sort of things. But my mind suddenly went to, what if we were able to connect that to a TV rather than a small display? So it was now a big display in your room where you live, and we connect a webcam to it, and now we put that into people's homes, and we can remotely use that, deciding which URL it looks at, to drop them into web meetings. And is there a way that we can do that where they don't have to touch anything? They don't have to make an account. They don't have to tell it what its name is. They don't have to say, yes, I want to join. They're just in the meeting with us, and they don't have to touch anything on the TV where they're used to seeing people. And is that actually more socially connecting than some abstract head bobbing about on a laptop or a phone or something? Is that actually more real? in a world where we can't actually get together physically for a while. So there was a couple of aims to my project. I wanted to constrain it somehow. I didn't want people to have to go out and buy expensive technology, because supply is short, shipping is difficult. Like I said, I wanted to integrate it with things they already had, like the TV, so that there were things that were familiar to them, not new things that they didn't know how to use and were scared of. I wanted it to be completely zero touch for the person whose home it is in. So there's no barriers at all to them being able to join a call. And then for the people that are making it, I didn't want to assume that these are techie geeks that know how to do Git actions and these sort of things. I wanted it to be as easy to make, deploy, and administrate as possible. And I didn't want them to have to know any kind of knowledge about, you know, making WPA supplicant files and put them into particular addresses, all of that stuff, or installing software packages. It can't be that hard, or it's going to put a barrier to people who possibly could make this for somebody who needs it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, based on the description you just provided, you know, I think a lot of folks in tech and in the world in which we typically operate in a daily basis, folks like you and I, you know, we take a lot of that for granted. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I can open up a Zoom meeting
Yeah.
and a Google Hangout and, you know, a half dozen others. I can configure microphones and video devices, and, you know, can you hear me now? Why is my camera on the wrong one, et cetera, et cetera. And I can troubleshoot all that. But there are a lot of folks out there that do not have those technical skills and would not be able to participate the way in which that, you know, this new world has, you know, perhaps altered some of my daily routines. Sure,
Yeah, right.
absolutely,
And
it has affected, but, you
some
know,
of those communities you wouldn't even think of, and
yeah,
it's quite easy to think, right, what we're talking about is
yeah.
granddad and grandma here, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not even so limited as that. So my wife is in the healthcare industry. She works with
Mm-hmm.
people that have had brain injuries, and cognitive degeneration and these sort of things.
Yep.
And you know, these people can be in their 30s and 40s, but they've had something happen in their life. And those people now also couldn't manage FaceTiming, and due to cognitive impairment or injury or whatever it is. And also those people, you know, in this time where lots of people are finding other things to do with their time in lockdown, gardening, painting, reading, learn something, those people might not actually be able to do that. So, you know, they've got a lot of time and not much contact. And those are the people that social interaction is absolutely key. And removing the barriers for those people to maintain social contact, especially with loved ones and family, to me, that felt like something that really a problem that technology could help them solve. And luckily, we did, as Balena,
Yeah.
we already had a product that I could build on top of.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Um,
that sounds amazing. Thank you for that background and that context on it. It definitely definitely makes sense to me. So I'd say let's take a look at the hardware that you would need, and if you could walk us through, I suppose, the build process of what this would look like, would be really super cool. I just realized that we are um, we have all of this documented on our blog, on our
yeah,
balena.io/blog, but I'm going to take the URL and I'll paste it into the YouTube description. I just realized that we don't have YouTube chat going, so I can't drop the links in there, but I can paste them into the description down below. So
yeah,
just have a
yeah,
look in there.
yeah. So we've made a blog post and that details how to build it. And there's two sort of routes. So anybody that's familiar with Balena, and we will try and talk about what we're doing as we go through. We'll do some demo and then we'll revert back at times and sort of point out what happened at times where we're waiting for something to happen. But there's sort of two ways through this. If you're more of an advanced user and you know your GitHub from your Balena cloud and you know what you're doing, then there is a tutorial that you can follow and you can tailor it yourself. And perhaps you want to remove some of the bits that are in the repo because you don't need them. But for everybody else, this coincided with another piece of functionality that Balena are in the process of rolling out, which is a button that you click and it deploys projects to your devices in sort of one click, and it encapsulates lots of things. The software and kind of the configuration all in one go. And that's what we'll do today, and you can see that happening. So I can move over. So what you can see on my screen there is, this is my Balena Cloud. You can see, because I'm a hardware hacker, I have lots of applications.
Sure do.
Some people have got many more than me. I'm getting a bit of app envy, but I've got a few. So what we would normally do in the kind of more advanced way is create an application and go and configure it for whatever we want to do. And then we would push code to the application, all that kind of thing. But we're going to do the deploy to Balena button. So this is a GitHub repo. I'm sure most people that are watching have seen it before. This is the Balena Dash ones. This is the project that I started hacking on top of, in effect. So the Balena Dash is connecting a Pi to a display and then pointing it to a URL. And there's a display, and then there's a Chromium browser that runs when you're using a Raspberry Pi 4, and that Chromium browser picks up that URL and displays it on the screen. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click our deploy to Balena button. And what that does is starts me off with an application. I've already got an account, as you've seen, and it's going to make me a new application within Balena Cloud. If you click this advanced button, you can see some of the configuration values that previously, and if you look at the blog post, they're explained. Previously, we would talk you through how to set all of these up. The deploy to the Balena button sort of takes all those steps away, and it's defaulting the things that you already need. So I'm setting some my GPU memory and all these different things. And there's a couple of environment variables here that set up how the project can be configured. So you can already see this launch URL, and note that at the moment it's pointing to a YouTube video. So that will come up later. And there's a couple more things which I'm going to change actually from the default. So I'm going to say that I want to be able to see my cursor, and I want the Raspberry Pi to be able to control my TV. And I can deploy that. So what that is now doing is creating an app in my Balena Cloud account. Here it is. And there'll be a short delay, but what it's going to do in the background is go to the GitHub repo that we just saw, and it's going to pick up that code that's in that repo. So it already knows the repo that it's attached to. You can see up here, we're starting to build a release. So if I click into that, I can see the Docker Compose file. For the more advanced people, you can see that it's starting to make me a kiosk service and a scheduler and a Wi-Fi connect. And we can talk about all those things in a minute. What it's starting to do in the background is build the app, the code that's going to run on any of the devices that I add to this app.
Very
so that's
cool.
what I'm going to do.
And
cool.
Just one quick question, that building that is going on, is that being done in the cloud or on your local machine?
It's being done in the cloud.
Oh, magic.
So it's pulling in all that code to a cloud builder and building it in the background. So awesome. That's going to happen in the background, and we'll see the logs come up later. But for now, we can sort of do some things in parallel. We're going to add a device, and this is going to be the thing that's going to be plugged into the person's TV ultimately. So we're going to build it. I'm going to leave everything. It's a Raspberry Pi 4. It defaults to the right thing because of the type of project that we've told it's going to be. The important thing here to point out is I can set here some network configuration so that my device, as soon as it plugs in and it comes online and learns that it's a Raspberry Pi running Balena OS, it also knows how to connect to a network. I'm not going to put in my actual Wi-Fi because I can't be bothered. It's a massive Wi-Fi key. I'm actually going to run on Ethernet, but you can see that I can put in a Wi-Fi SSID and password. And what that will do, now I download this image, what that's doing is configuring that image exactly for the app that I'm deploying with all of that configuration. So it knows what app it's part of and that network configuration. And that's bringing it down into a zip file.
Okay, so essentially it's all pre-populated. All of the
pre-populated, yeah,
everything
absolutely.
you just selected is injected directly into the image.
Yeah. And that's one of my aims from the project, if you remember, that I don't want people to have to know about how to go into a Linux file system and add a certain file with a certain, all of that is just too much of a barrier. So as David mentioned, we're possibly quite well known for a program that we have called Etcher. And what Etcher does is flashes images onto SD cards and USBs and certain devices. So I can use Etcher now, and I can find that. I've got two because I had a dry run earlier. I'll select one of them. And then I've got my SD card, which I can pop into my SD card reader. I like this bit. Watch this. Watch Balena Etcher. Just finds
Yeah.
my SD card. It's things like that,
Magic.
isn't it? Yeah, it's just a little find. I don't have to go and tell it to find that thing. I can kick flash. So while that's going, I think it's probably worth reiterating that the image that I'm putting onto that SD card now, not only is it configured for the Wi-Fi, if I was using, I'm going to use Ethernet because it's just quicker, but it's also telling it what app it's part of. So when we connect that device, we'll see that it's going to pop up here, and it's all going to be, it will know how to connect to the network,
Now,
join this application, and then this build that we're now running, this is the code that will, once the device has joined the app, it will then download this release that we can see building now. So that's what's happening in the background.
Yep. So while that's going, I have a question. You chose a Raspberry Pi 4. Can this project run on any other Raspberry Pis? I mean, there's also a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 0. Do any of those work? Or
the 0 is, there's two sort of camps in Balena. There's the people that really don't like 0, and there's the people, myself and my colleague Chris, who champion the 0 and feel like it's sort of the poor cousin and it needs more love. No, it couldn't run on a 0, and it couldn't run on a 1, and it couldn't run on a 2, and it couldn't run on a 3. That's the sort of quick truth. It can run on a 3B plus. And Balena Dash itself runs happily. If you see above my, where am I pointing?
yeah,
There's like a little screen here, and that's
I
one
saw
of those.
that little screen back
Yeah,
there.
that's one of those Pi displays, 7-inch touchscreens, and that's running a calendar, and it tells my children what they're doing today and shows some photos, and it does its job perfectly. I can point it at some websites, and it will display them. Oh, look, it's just done. Flash complete. Yeah. Let me get I could share my flash on Twitter, but I'm not going to because I'm not feeling social. What I'm feeling is I've got my SD card,
Yep.
and it's time to plug in some hardware together. So I've got a Raspberry Pi 4. So to complete that, what you were just saying, there's not enough horsepower on a 3B plus to do what we want to do, which is video meetings.
Video, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking as well. The 4 has the stronger processor.
It has a stronger processor, and it can do some types of video decoding on hardware. So we'll talk about the exact what we're using for video calls in a bit.
Yep.
So the first thing I'm going to do is plug my SD card into my Pi 4, and then we're going to go and plug this into my TV. I've got a bit of a complicated setup because you can imagine it's hard to get some webcams at the minute.
Yeah.
I've already got my spare one is being used on the TV they're about to see. So we've got like an IP webcam here that's pointing at my TV. So I'm going to go and plug this in. You'll also notice just, I have got, just for the sharp-eyed, I have got a USB dongle in there for a USB mouse, and we'll see why that's important in a minute, but it's just for this, like the initial config. It's not something that needs to stay in there. We'll see why that's important in a minute. So I shall...
Okay, he's taking a walk over to the TV.
You can probably still hear me.
Yeah, a little bit distant, but I can hear you. But we can certainly see that you're plugging in the Ethernet cable now. It's a little difficult to see that USB adapter hanging off, but I'm assuming you didn't remove it. Now that you just plugged in was another USB device. I'll assume that that was the camera.
Yep.
And there goes the HDMI cable to the television. Yep. And then the last thing I would imagine is going to be power. Yep. Okay, so we've got the Pi plugged in, powered up.
One thing you'll notice is that there is quite a delay between me doing things at the TV and you being able to see them, but that's because it's going over an IP camera through VLC, through some complicated OBS stuff. So that's just why there's a delay. But look straight away, my TV is turning on. Yep. And if we go to this screen so that we can see, there's a TV, you can see the Balena logo. So that's starting to turn on and boot.
So
if we go back, and if we go back to Balena Dash in Balena Cloud, whilst that device starts turning on, at some point it will appear in here, and we'll see that it starts to connect because it knows how to get. I've used the Ethernet, you see, but that's just just because I can pull the containers down really quick for this demo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same if I'd configure the Wi-Fi, it would find it and turn on.
So now over on the TV, I can see the Balena logo, which means the device is powered up, and it means that it's running its default configuration. But I can also see over on your Balena Cloud account that it's still spinning. So do we need to pause for a moment while that finishes? Or do we think that that's gonna typically takes, I don't know, what, 5 or 10 minutes maybe?
The build, it depends really. It depends what time of day you're doing it. So clearly it's just past lunchtime where you are. It's the middle of the night where I am. That's how Balena works. We're across the whole, I don't know how many different time zones we cover, many.
A global. It's probably worth stating that I am actually located in Phoenix, in Arizona, in the United States. And Phil, you are joining from where? Outside of London, if I'm not mistaken?
Outside of London. That's such like an American way of asking where somebody in England
London?
is. Yeah. Are you in London?
Or it's either London or the rest of the country.
Yeah. No, I'm not in London. I'm outside London. So I'm in a
You're
place
outside of London. Okay, great.
I'm in Surrey, and that's not Surrey, Vancouver, or anywhere. Surrey, England. Just outside.
So
of
outside
London.
of London. Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah. I'm in the green, cloudy, hilly bit of the country. But yeah, that's like the middle of the night here.
Well, thank you for joining us in the middle of the night. I apologize.
No, that's fine. So that release is running, and we're just waiting for our device to join.
So what I can do is actually pause our recording here and then simply resume it back once the device has come online. So I can do that real quick. All right, we're back, and I see you've got a device that has joined the fleet.
Yeah, join the fleet, join the app.
Well, join the app, that's what it should say.
Yeah. So, it did. And the other thing that happened is our release built, so we can see that succeeded. This is a screen you saw earlier, but now we've got these cool colored things. So these are the containers that we've built inside our app. And if you look at the GitHub repo, you can see there's a folder for each of those and a Docker file in each. And they do different things, some of which we can talk about later. But the main one we want to think about here is the kiosk one. So that's the one that's running the Chromium browser. And it's the thing that's picking up the launch URL that we use in our config values to decide what to display. So if we go back to the device now, what that will be doing in the background is you can see that's starting to download those containers. So that's pulling the code from that release onto the actual Raspberry Pi. And we just make sure my TV is pointing at the right thing again. And then that kiosk container will start up. It will pick up the launch URL. And if you remember, I said, keep in mind that it was pointing at a YouTube video. So what we should see now is that it will come online and it will display our YouTube video. You can see it's a bit small, but it's starting to download images from the release that was built onto the Raspberry Pi itself.
It's making progress there. I can see the containers are progressing as they download. Yeah.
People at Balena are pretty envious. There's so much hate about my download bandwidth, but it's pretty sprightly. So I've plugged it into Ethernet. It should be pretty quick.
I've done some live streams where my downloads look like I'm on a old dial-up 56K modem, and I swear like I'm doing a live stream. So how could it possibly be a? But I don't know. Something about my Pis do not like to pull down containers. All right. So you're almost there now. What are you doing over there? Oh yeah, I can see YouTube coming on. Hang on a minute.
It's gonna go. Yeah, we're still down in there. We're 99% on the kiosk.
Yeah, we're almost there. I see one
started service kiosk, and it's worth sort of pointing out just for completeness that this is like a do once operation. It's not that this is going to happen each time it turns on. or any of that.
Yeah, this
You
is
also,
just the initial setup, correct?
yeah, just
Right.
the initial setup.
Yep.
Um, and also there was, you might have seen that there was a configuration element for control TV. So that what that does is use TVs have something we call CEC, which is where if something starts talking via the HDMI cable, the TV can switch to the source. So that's another important thing.
Oh.
If you've got people, some people don't even know how to use the remote to control their own TV. That's actually a thing.
Yeah,
And like
that
you
is
were saying,
absolutely a thing. I can vouch for that. My parents cannot figure out how to select sources or understand what a source is on a on a video device. Yep.
yeah, and that's sort of another thing that, like you were saying, that we assume people can do certain things, and certain things are very easy. But it's, for some people, using their own remote control and their own TV and understanding what is a source is a bit too much. So there is, if you set that value to 1, like I did, then that will mean the Raspberry Pi will send a signal through the HDMI to say to the TV, something's happening on the Raspberry Pi. Switch to the Raspberry Pi now. And then they
Wow.
will, when you join the meeting, they'll be there on the TV. When you finish the meeting, it will say to the HDMI, you can go back to what you were doing.
Okay, so hang
Um,
on a minute. I don't know that I realized that. So let's just say, as example, my parents, they're not the most technical, and they have it because I set it up, set to their aux input or whatever it was that their TV box, cable box, so she can watch regular broadcast TV. Okay, that's all well and good. But you're now telling me that the Raspberry Pi in this scenario is going to tell the TV to switch to a different HDMI input, HDMI 2 in that scenario. And then when it's done, is it going to actually revert back to HDMI 1?
well, the CEC is a standard, and it's up to each TV manufacturer how they implement it. So your
Gotcha.
mileage may vary.
Okay.
I only have 2 TVs in my house, one of which plays ball perfectly, the other of which sometimes switches, sometimes doesn't, sometimes switches back, and sometimes doesn't. So that's kind of why we made it
Okay.
configurable, is your mileage may vary. You
Yep.
might need to turn that off, or it might completely switch when you're in a meeting and switch back to whatever they were watching, the news.
Yeah, the soap
So
operas.
yeah, yeah, we're going to need another pause, dude, because it's not switched on the TV.
All
It
right.
worked 3 times in a row.
Okay, we're back again, and I see some activity on that TV.
Yeah,
What am I looking at?
so you remember that I can show you on the cloud. Let me show you the cloud. Let me focus in on that. Um, in these device variables, you can remember we had a launch URL, and we had, this one is a YouTube video, and it's actually a YouTube video of another Balena product called Balena Sound, which is a cool thing where you can cast your Spotify and Bluetooth and stuff all around your house. So that's what we're doing there. And this URL now, you could set this to whatever you want. So what we're going to do is we can override it, and we can override it to anything. This is our YouTube video, but some of the uses that my wife and I have used for elderly people in our neighborhood is they can't do shopping. We need to do some online shopping for them. When you're on the phone to them and they're trying to describe exactly what type of jam they want, it's pretty tricky. But if you can ping a URL onto their TV and say, did you mean this jam? They can say, yes, that's the jam I want. So that, online shopping's a thing. Some of these people,
Oh, wow.
you can say, if you look at your TV now, I'm putting a news article on the TV saying why you should not go to bingo
So
this week.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
There's a multitude of uses.
I hadn't
And we're
thought
going
of
to use
that
that.
use case. That is actually incredible.
Yeah. Well, we're living it, so we're finding loads of use
Yeah.
cases. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this functionality, but we're going to put them into a web meeting. And like I said, one of the aims of the project is these people that have these in their homes should have zero touch. They shouldn't have to do anything. They shouldn't have to say, yes, I want to join the meeting, or anything else, because it might be too much for them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you're going to ring them up and say, I'm about to put you in a meeting. We're going to
Yeah.
courteous, but then we are going to put them in a meeting and it should just happen on the TV. So I've changed that URL, and you can see in the cloud, things are whizzing about, containers are stopping. So it's detected that an environment variable has changed, and it's restarting the containers to pick that up. The kiosk container is going to restart, and it will pick up the new URL we've just set. And that URL is to something called Jitsi.
Okay, I've heard that term before. What is Jitsi exactly?
So Jitsi is a video call, video conferencing type website. It actually underpins a lot of other sites that you may have used before. But what's really cool about it is you make a unique URL, and it's like a pretty URL. So rather than it being a bunch of weird characters, you can make names up. So the one that we've put here is called Parallel Dances Describe Painfully. I didn't actually make that, but I like it, so I keep it. And what it's done is it's, if we sort of focus in on the pie a little bit here so that we can see what's going on, boop, you can see it's put it into something else. And what that something else is a site, is the dialogue that pops up. Anybody who's used Chrome will know that when you go to a new site and it wants to use your webcam and it wants to use your microphone, you have to say, yes, I want to allow. And this is why we plugged in that USB dongle for a mouse. And that's why I have a little mouse. And I can use this and look over at my TV and click the allow button. You can tell I've done this before because I know what the button is. And you can see there's a little blue light flashing on my webcam, and you can see the back of my head. So what that is, that's Jitsi, but it's not in a call with anybody. It's on a call on its own. So it's just showing you what the camera on top of the TV is looking at. The other thing that there's a little dialogue saying, would I like to install an extension? What's cool about this project is we use persistent storage in the background, persistent data. So there's a volume on Docker, and it contains the settings for Chrome. So this setting up business, the allowing the webcam, the allowing the microphone, saying no to certain dialogues, that's just for us to config in the initial bit. Now those settings.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, is does that happen every time? Because I can imagine that, you know, an at-risk individual, an elderly individual is not going to understand all of that stuff.
So you remember right at the start when I deployed with Balena with the button, I said I would like it to show my cursor, which is why I can wiggle my mouse around on the screen. That allows me to do the config. Once I've done all of these settings, I can take that USB dongle out. I don't have to use a mouse. I can tell it, no, I don't want to show a cursor, and we won't see any of that again. So what I can do now that we're in a meeting, but we're in a meeting with ourselves, and that's a bit lonely, I can change my screen again, and you can see on my laptop, I am also in Jitsi, and I can also join that meeting. So the sharp-eyed will see I'm also joining Parallel Dances Describe Painfully. And you can see over on the left, that's my laptop connected to the Pi and seeing what the camera on top of the TV showing. And you can see now on the TV, there's a different view straight up my nose. That's me.
The nose cam.
It's a bit difficult because I'm in a meeting with myself, and trust me, I've been through weeks and weeks of having meetings with myself. It gets a bit meta, but so that's me in a web meeting with myself, zero touch.
That is incredible. So, okay, now all said and done, let's think about this high level. That device is configured, it's ready to go. At this point, you could place that into somebody's home. They will no longer have to, they will have no need for the mouse. They don't have to allow settings for microphone access. They don't have to do anything.
No.
You drop the Pi in their home, attach it to their TV. They will need internet, of course, that is a given.
Well, I mean, there's a good point there to say that although I told the Raspberry Pi about my Wi-Fi, it is possible, and there's documentation on the Balena website about how to configure multiple connections. So if the person whose house you're putting this into does have Wi-Fi, then you are able to configure that ahead of time. And then when you put it into their house, it will just connect. But we've also got, if you remember, and I'll try and show you, if you remember, there was different containers, and the one that I sort of skipped over and said I might come back to is this Wi-Fi Connect.
Yep.
So that's something else that we've dropped into this project. And what that does is if the Pi doesn't have a valid internet connection, and that's for many different reasons, including pinging out to endpoints and seeing if they return. If it doesn't think it has an internet connection for any reason, it will expose an access point. And that means that's like a second go at being able to configure it to Wi-Fi. You might be able to go to the vulnerable person's neighbors and say, would you be able to make a guest Wi-Fi and take those credentials, go and stand outside their home, connect to that AP with your phone as a captive portal on the other end, configure that guest Wi-Fi, and there you are. You've now got an online connection that way. And then the other thing, if all of those things aren't an option, I have run this with a dongle, a USB dongle for cellular connection. So
really?
it will run. Yeah, it will. I mean, you obviously need a decent connection for it to run video call, but it does work over. I have done it over a cellular connection. And it does work.
You know, if you've got a quick enough 4G LTE,
yeah.
maybe a plan that does not throttle or, you know, has a large enough data cap or whatnot, because certainly there's going to be some issues or concerns there. But I mean,
I mean, those concerns, they also, they're similar to the discussion of like the performance of this thing. And you've got to remember, what we're targeting here are people who are socially disconnected and currently maybe only talk to people on the phone, and that might be their only social interaction they have. So the performance, it's not going to be, you know, it's still a constrained device. It's a Raspberry Pi 4 and it's fairly capable, but it's still not going to be seamless. It's not going to be as good as Zoom chat that we're used to, or anything else, you know, on laptops and desktops. It's going to lag slightly every now and again, but it is definitely better than not having anything. And it is actually very usable. And I've tried it now with several colleagues, and it was actually more socially connecting, and it struck me as a nicer experience than like you and I are doing here. I'm used to seeing you as a head bobbing about on the screen wearing headphones. But when I saw Chris and Andrew stood in their own environment, stood up with legs and moving around, and Chris was sat on his sofa, and you know, he was part of my room and I was part of his, it was actually much more socially connecting. And the fact that it wasn't seamless without any lags, it was immaterial. It was a much nicer experience than this.
So that's an interesting observation, something again that, you know, folks like you and I probably take for granted. Whereas, yeah, I'm used to seeing you as a bobbing head here in Zoom. But now, even in those screens that you were sharing just a moment ago, yeah, I could see your whole room. I could see how you're working. I could see all of the context that comes along for the ride. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if I go over to the Pi and go and walk over to it, you can see I'm in my environment. I'm in my room. You can see how I move around. And that is actually a very different experience to this type of view. And people who are not used to web meetings and like you and I, it's not that innate an experience when you suddenly are a head on a device in front of them. If you put yourself on their TV where they're used to seeing other people, news readers, whatever, presenters, they're used to seeing people there and they're used to seeing you, and suddenly it is much more of a connecting experience. So the fact it might lag every now and again, it doesn't matter. The fact that you might have to pay for quite a beefy data plan, believe me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that is really, really cool. That is a powerful project you have built there and shown us. So I'm looking at the clock. I know that we don't have all that much time, so I'll wrap us up here. Phil, thank you for showing it off. As I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, I will place the links in the YouTube description. So anyone watching, just go grab those URLs from the YouTube description, and you can follow along and build one of your own. Is there anything else you want to add, Phil?
Just that. Go to the blog. You can read how to tailor it to yourself. So we didn't talk about you can do photo slideshows. So there's more to it if you want to. But my sort of key point is that there is absolutely no barrier to people being able to build these. Click the button, deploy it, build it, and put it into somebody's home who would appreciate seeing their loved ones at a time like this.
Yeah, that is Just incredible. Well, thank you very much for taking the time and showing off the project. I certainly appreciate it, and I'm sure a lot of folks out there will make good use of it. If anyone does build it, by all means, let us know. You can send an email over to hello@balena.io. Again, I'll put it in the description, or simply on Twitter at Balena_IO. Again, I'll put it in the YouTube description. But I'd love to hear about if you guys build some of these. All right. Well, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate it. And if you have any questions, just reach out. Bye, guys.